It melted a hole in the bottom of my cup. Oh, fantastic. Alright, we'll make it work. Hello everyone and welcome back. My name is Pat, and you may have seen in the last video that I uploaded, I'm going to be changing the direction of the channel a little bit. I'm expanding the YouTube universe, whatever kind of universe it is, to encompass multiple hobbies. We're going to go hard right out the gate. We're going to give you guys a real test. So today we're going to talk about 3D printing, and specifically a technique that I think I've developed it, but it's not very complicated, so I'm sure someone's done it before. But it's just the technique that I use if I am going to be 3D printing something that I know is going to be either outside in the elements, or that in general I just need it to be very solid. And this is what I'm going to be making today. This is a 3D scan of, I believe, a Korean bonsai pot, and I went ahead and printed it out. It's got a cool look to it, which is just kind of the aesthetic I go for, but the important part, and the part you're probably here for, solid as a rock. I'm going to go ahead and show you how I made that happen. So let's get into it. So the first thing I did was I brought the model into Tinkercad and I punched some holes in the bottom. These are going to act as supports since the base of my particular print is also hollow and there's a cavity in the middle. But if you're just doing a solid block, some kind of a sculpture or something like that, you shouldn't need to do this. But I did it because it's just how I've learned to keep these prints successful. Alright, so 9 hours later, it is time to clean up our 3D print. This one went really well, and it's just a matter of removing the supports on the bottom and sanding out all the little boogers on the inside. Alright, flash forward, we have cleaned everything up, and now it's time to break out the Mod Podge. What's this for? Well, if your print didn't turn out super successfully, you can use this stuff to patch up any holes in preparation for what we are going to be eventually doing to this, which is filling it with resin, and we'll get to that in a second. For my purposes, these holes were specifically meant to aid in the printing process, so I need to plug them up in order to do my resin pour in a minute here. And this stuff is great if you have any big old gaps from a misprinted print. As you can see there, it can really come to the rescue in many different kinds of situations. And now I am drilling some holes around kind of the perimeter of my base here, just to get some airflow for when I pour the resin down into the middle. And here I am ripping a hole out. You can be as delicate as you want with this. I don't care about the aesthetics, especially on the bottom, so I'm just kind of hacking a hole in there. This is the star of the show, Bondo fiberglass resin. Stuff is super cheap. It's like 15 bucks for this whole can. It's pretty easy to mix, pretty hard to mess up. 1 ounce of resin gets 10 drops of hardener. And to measure it all out, little life hack here, that first line on solo cups is actually 1 ounce. I believe all of the different little ridges in those cups are some kind of measurement, but for sure the first line is 1 ounce. So I typically use them to measure out this resin when I'm doing a pour. I don't know that I would recommend using these cups, and you'll see why in a second, but they are very convenient and I use them despite some complications they may have. And one last sound check. You can really hear how hollow and truly plasticky this thing is, but not for much longer. Now the resin does flow fairly freely, so you want to be careful. You'll see in a minute here that I was not very careful, but this stuff will flow wherever you allow it to. So that's why I'm using the lip of my print here, that lip of the base. I'm using that to act as kind of a reservoir, which is ultimately why I plugged up those holes. Like I said, depends entirely on which kind of a print you are filling with resin, so use your own discretion. And here I'm just squishing in the sides while they're still a little flexible, just to kind of help work the resin down into every nook and cranny. And right there, you can see some trouble brewing. Yep, This resin will melt through the bottom if you you let it sit in those cups for too long. It melted a hole in the bottom of my cup. Oh, fantastic. All right, we'll make it work. So yeah, some improvisation was in order. I just kind of spread the excess resin around the outside and thinned it out a lot. Then I let the mold sit to let whatever resin was in there settle down. And you could definitely see some of that cup melted into the resin and discolored it. Luckily, it didn't mess with the curing of the resin, so I got lucky. But now it's time to keep going, because these molds, and that's kind of what these are, is molds. You're really just keeping the mold as a part of the final object in that, the 3D print is the mold. But they take a lot more resin than you might think, so really keep an eye on all those holes you drilled, if you did drill as many holes as I did. So you really want to make sure that the resin gets down into every little hole. I did have one little spot that kept taking more and more resin, so who knows where that little cavity led to, but I got it all filled up in the end, and we were good to go. Now it's a couple hours later, the resin has cured, and because I am impatient, went right into drilling. Of course, I didn't wait for it to totally cure, and I should have. Namely, I kind of separated some of the resin that I had just painstakingly poured. So, a little bit of a cleanup later, and I just poured a little bit more on top to re-secure everything. Obviously not the recommended course of action, but hey, I never said I was good at any of this. And now I am reshaping the bottom of the vessel back to its original concave shape. It'll just stabilize the pot, give it the base that it was originally intended to have. It's also going to add some space for drainage underneath. And I wasn't sure really how to do this at first. I tried a couple different tools and eventually settled on the good old-fashioned Dremel, and that cleaned it up just fine. So if you're doing this at home, go for the Dremel first. Now it's time to coat this thing. First, I'm going to hit it with this Vintage Effect tinting spray. I really like this stuff. Honestly, I have yet to find something that this stuff doesn't work its way into, but maybe that's just my taste. On the backside here, at first I didn't lay it on thick enough and I got some splotchy areas, and then I laid it on way too thick and it started dripping a little bit. So I went ahead and smoothed it out and it worked out okay. Last step, Rust-Oleum Triple Thick Glaze. I like to coat all of my products that will live outdoors in this stuff just to give it an extra coat of protection, as well as just kind of a nice looking shiny exterior coat. If you really want to go the extra mile, I recommend doing some kind of UV spray to protect your colors from fading. And we're back. All in all, I think a successful build, but of course, we gotta put a plant in this thing, so cue the B-roll of a plant in the pot. One of my favorite techniques for making 3D prints far more durable and much less likely to succumb to whatever elements you may be subjecting them to. So, hope you enjoyed the video, hope you learned something. If you did, feel free to leave a like. It helps out with the YouTube algorithm if you do such a thing. And of course, subscribe if you would like to see more wacky projects moving on into the future. All right, everybody, thanks a lot for watching, and I will see you next time.